Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. What I don't like doing is driving back in the snow. We've had snow today and we don't like it. And I know people from snowy countries always say, oh, you're useless. Yes, we are. We don't get snow very often. We don't know what to do with it, even when it's relatively light. But, you know, it was settling, didn't like it. And what's worse, it was unexpected. I was not expecting this, did not see this in the forecast. But what I did see in the forecast, what I definitely was expecting, was what Theresa May went through yesterday when she was supposed to bring back her Plan B for the Brexit deal. So just a quick recap. A week ago, Theresa May's Brexit deal was defeated by 230. A monumental, quite literally historic defeat. Zero chance of bringing this back. This deal is dead on arrival, cannot be resurrected. And her main tactic for pushing this through, if her strategy was getting this deal through, her main tactic for doing so was to try and convince MPs that they have a choice between this deal and no deal. You know, she will keep bringing this back in the belief that she can keep going till late March to the point where there's nothing anyone can do. It's either vote for this or vote for no deal. And maybe enough MPs will vote for it to get it through. I don't know whether that would be the case or not. What I do know is that that tactic has failed. First of all, it's far too large a margin to pull it back anyway. But over the last few weeks, Parliament has been flexing its muscles. It has demonstrated that it has power. For example, Theresa May should have had 3 weeks to come back with her Plan B. However, Parliament said, no, you're not spending that long, because they know what she's up to. They said, right, you can have 3 days, 3 sitting days. It was actually turned out to be a bit more than 3 days, but it was still just under a week. So her tactic now is cannot work. The problem is, of course, for her, it's quite a good thing for me, is that her government, one, it's a minority government, so she doesn't have an overall majority, and two, it's a fractured party. That makes it weak. Okay, that makes it very weak. If she had a large majority, then she probably would have forced this through already. But it isn't. It's weak, and MPs know that, and they know that they can enforce their own will. They also know that a majority will not accept no deal. So they also know that they can keep rejecting this deal. And it doesn't mean the alternative is no deal. There are alternatives, and they know that they can enforce that. And they know there's the political will to do that. There may not be an overall majority for any particular solution, but there is definitely a majority that don't like that deal and don't like no deal and will find something else. So May can't force that simple choice on them. Now, over the next few days of that vote, what she then did was meet with opposition MPs, and they all came away saying, oh, she won't budge on anything. She's been really blinkered on this. And okay, the problem was that Jeremy Corbyn didn't go along to that meeting. Yes, I know, and I totally agree with what he said. You know, it was pointless. It was a stunt by her because she's not actually discussing. In fact, what it seems to me is her plan was to explain. I mean, from in her head, all I can think of is she's invited these MPs. I mean, first of all, by saying that she's going to reach out across the House. I mean, that's a frank admission. She wasn't doing that for the last 2 years. I'm sorry, but if you've got a minority government and you aren't talking about the most important event in modern British history to the opposition who you know you're going to need for support, you're mad. You're absolutely mad. Worse than that, stupid. But anyway, it was a frank admission of that. And it was like in her own head, she was thinking to herself, right, I know what the problem is. They don't understand the deal. I'll explain it to them. And that's all they got from it. And it's like these MPs are going, no, we do understand it. It's a bit like when she postponed the first vote on it so she could get assurances from the EU. It's like, oh, they're confused about the backstop. They think it's going to be a thing. No, we need to make it clear. None of us want it. Yeah, people get that. People understand that. But they also understand that you can't avoid the backstop. Okay, more of that in a moment. So, Jeremy Corbyn was a bit foolish because obviously he's now been attacked. He's attacked in the Commons for not going as long as that meeting. He's attacked in the media. The media that bash him anyway, granted. But still, there was no need for it. All he had to do was go along to that meeting, eat a biscuit. There might even have been Jaffa cakes. And come away from it and say, well, that was just like everyone else. That was a waste of time. She's not budging on anything. How hard is that? You go along. None of the other party leaders are getting attacked, because how can she attack them? Because they went along to meet her. He is getting attacked because he hasn't. How silly. All he had to do was go there. He's got time in his day, and he'd have got a biscuit out of it, maybe a cake, cup of tea. Bargain. You know. Anyway. So basically yesterday, Theresa May had to outline her plan B. As expected, it looks cunningly like her plan A. When it comes down to it, she made 3 points in her 12-minute speech, really. First of all, that EU citizens resident in the UK right now won't have to pay the £65 fee to apply for settled status. Those who already paid it will be refunded. Now, that seemed to meet with approval, but it's not going to make people vote for her deal. Secondly, she said she'd continue to listen to opposition MPs, though we already know that they've given up hope when she refuses to budge on her stance. She's saying no to every one of their proposals and saying that her deal is the only deal on the table. And specifically, not only is she saying no to their proposals, she's saying, oh, there's no point in even voting on it. I mean, no one's going to vote for that. So by promising those consultations, all she's actually doing is shining a light on the fact that she paid no attention to Parliament over the past 2 years. And third, she's talked about amending the backstop, but that guarantees failure. If she removes the backstop, I still don't believe it would get through Parliament. But let's say it did, it would be rejected by the EU. Now, just to explain the backstop really briefly for those who aren't sure. So, in order to guarantee peace in Ireland, there has to be an open border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Okay? That is part of the Good Friday Agreement, and that is what clinched the Good Friday, the peace process, really. Now, what the backstop does is the deal itself is really a transitionary deal so that we have a bit more time to come to a final agreement on our relationship with the EU. But where that border is concerned, either we are going to have relatively free movement between the UK and the EU, or we are not. That's one of two things. You either have a hard border, or you have an open border, or very close to it, at least a relatively free border. But here's the thing, you cannot have even a relatively free border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That has to be open, has to be. That cannot work with a hard border. Impossible. The only way to even come to a compromise on that is to put a hard border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. That is not acceptable to anyone, quite frankly. So what this backstop does, it says, well, let's say after this transition period, either we haven't come to a final agreement, or if we have come to a final agreement, but that agreement doesn't allow for an open border with Northern Ireland, then Northern Ireland has to sort of remain in the customs union so that that border can remain open. That would mean that Northern Ireland will have to follow a different set of rules to the rest of the United Kingdom. Further, it would mean that Northern Ireland would have to follow a set of rules that was partially decided by the Republic of Ireland, but for which they themselves don't get a say. If you're not familiar with the Irish situation, I cannot even begin to describe what a tinderbox that would be. So, you know, that would be a disaster. And the thing is, everyone keeps saying we don't really want the backstop in place. No, we don't. No one does. Not the EU, not the UK, certainly not Northern Ireland, and certainly not the Republic of Ireland. But it would have to be until someone came up with a solution for the Irish border. And if we want a hard border between the UK and the EU, there is no solution. So not only would it come into effect, it would remain in effect forever. Okay, until we changed our mind over the hard border, or until Northern Ireland left the Union. And people keep saying that as if that's a solution. That's not what the people of Northern Ireland are wanting. Some do, obviously. That's what caused the trouble. But the troubles specifically, as in inverted commas. But no, but there's a great many that don't want that, and they're just as violent and aggressive about it. So that's not a solution. So that's the situation of the backstop, and that's why it's so divisive. And it's like, if you're going to have a transitionary deal, you have to have the backstop. But if you have a backstop, it will keep getting voted down by the UK Parliament. The EU, particularly the Republic of Ireland, insist upon it. The problem is, if we leave under any conditions that mean a hard border has to exist between the UK and the EU, as in the event of a no deal, for example, there has to be a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And that's just back to civil war. But the thing is, so no deal can actually be possible in this situation unless the far-right group that at the moment is calling the shots with Theresa May was shot down. You can't have a border that's both open and closed, and everyone knows that. So removal of the backstop would gain the support from some dissenters. Whether it's enough, I don't know, but the EU would block it. Ireland has effectively been given a veto on this because obviously it's important to them, and the EU bats for their own side, and Ireland is a part of the EU and intends to remain a part of the EU. So the bottom line is that if May changes her deal enough to get through Parliament, it won't be agreed by the EU. Michel Barnier has already explained this yesterday, as if it weren't clear enough. So the current situation, as I read it, as follows. 1. Parliament will not pass her deal because it cannot fundamentally change without being rejected by the EU. 2. May's been described by everyone who knows her as inflexible. This has been evidenced by her refusal to entertain a genuine Plan B. So we know that her plan will be to try and force Parliament to make the choice between her deal and no deal, in the belief that they will prefer her deal, bad as it is, to the disaster of no deal. 3, May dare not suggest any softening of Brexit at all, because the far right doesn't have the loyalty to the party that she does. She believes their threats, that they are prepared to sink her government and even split the party to get what they want. But what they want is not what the majority of Parliament want at all. In fact, it's the opposite. And that's created a paralysis in May, which makes it impossible for her to do anything now. And 4, Parliament intends to remove the Prime Minister from the entire process if she hasn't found a solution by late February. There's a number of amendments that are being proposed at the moment. We don't know which ones will go through. Most of them wouldn't actually put a legal requirement on the government to act in a certain way, although if they went through, especially with a decent majority, they'd sort of see the writing on the wall. One of the amendments does, but basically the intention is to say to her, right, you've got till February, late February, which is still giving her plenty of bloody time, and then that's it. Now, obviously, a situation like that, once we get to, at the stage we are now, quite frankly, if you think about it, we've got, the deal is not going to go through. So at the moment, the default position is no deal. Whatever has to happen now, if they're not going to vote for her deal, has to require an extension. And that's got to make a second referendum more likely, because although MPs putting these amendments forward are trying to force Theresa May to apply for a no deal, an extension to Article 50, the EU aren't going to agree to that unless there's a coherent plan. There's got to be a good reason for it, which is going to result in some sort of outcome. They're not going to give an extension just to carry on thinking about it, talking about it and negotiating. They've already said that. They would give they've given indication that they, without saying overtly, that they would give an extension for another referendum to be held. So that just makes the referendum more likely. But nobody's talking positively about it yet. If Parliament do this, it effectively means we have no government, even though technically it's passed a vote of no confidence and may continue to do so. A lot of people believe, of course, that there's no good to be held by sacking the government, because a general election isn't going to solve anything. Even though, of course, I support a party on the opposition benches, I should be delighted with in normal circumstances, I'd be delighted with a general election, but it's not going to solve anything right now. What I would like is for MPs to can the party politics, okay? As the former Speaker of the House, Betty Boothroyd, said.
My Lords, many years ago a debate took place in the Commons that changed the course of the war. Backbenchers played a pivotal role then, and I hope will do so tomorrow. My message to them is, backbenchers, arise and forget your party allegiance. National interest demands it. Yeah.
So, on the face of it, Parliament remains deadlocked, and it appears we're going to have a period of times of brinkmanship over the next 5 weeks or so, with Theresa May keep bringing things back for a vote, and it keeps getting turned down, and then she goes, oh, I'll have another think about it. I've got an idea. Plan C. We'll have another vote. And that's going to keep going. But in actual fact, so that would in theory mean nothing much is going to happen in the interim. But I've thought that before, and there's stuff coming out every day, really is, just to highlight how important it all is. So in the final turn of events, May now be in a position where her party splits, regardless of what she does, because something interesting happened today. So far, it's been the far rights that have been making the threats. However, there's a large group of ministers. Okay, so the way this works is, we're not just talking about members of the cabinet. In a government, there's usually about 100 ministers, because you have the Secretary of State for whatever department. Then you have junior ministers as well, who are also MPs, working in that department as well. And there's reputedly dozens of them who have said that the solution now they see is going to require an extension of Article 50, and they are threatening that if May blocks any attempt to extend Article 50, they will resign. Now, that's not as big a threat as the far right have been doing, fair enough, because they're threatening to bring down the government and split the party. This group are simply threatening to paralyse government completely, because there will, if there's 40 fewer MPs as ministers, and remember, she hasn't got that many MPs to play with in terms of promoting them anyway. There's plenty of ministers already resigned. So it's not like they're easy vacancies to fill, if even possible. And of course, no MPs there. Obviously, civil servants run things, but they need direction from their political masters. That's how the democracy works. So, although it's not as serious a threat, and it's certainly not an attack directly on the party, nonetheless, it is an attack on her government. And yeah, so it could still be that she's in a situation now where people who want the extension are threatening her. The ERG on the other side of things, the far right group, they will go mad if there's an extension, because they know what an extension means. They know that the only way to get an extension is to offer up another referendum. So I think, although I'm not neutral on this, of course, I would say that in this damned if you do and damned if you don't scenario, I think she should probably just now stand up for what she believes in. Pick the side that you want history to remember for yourself choosing. Because at the moment, history is looking at her as a prize fool. She's trying to keep this party together. Okay, there's a lot of people who will appreciate her loyalty to the party. But that loyalty to the party is in direct contravention to her loyalty to the country, because that is completely absent at the moment. But if the party's buggered either way, or whether it's split, I mean, it might not split. It could be just idle threats either side. But she cannot now, by any action she carries out, prevent it. So she has to pick a side. Pick a bloody side, will you? But anyway, to go back to that inflexibility of hers. So will she take a stand and rule out no deal? As we know, she's as desperate to avoid as anyone else. The problem is that she promised a no-deal Brexit over a bad deal in her manifesto. Now, we understand that minority governments, as hers is, can't make good on all manifesto pledges. But if she were to rule it out, then she'd be breaking a manifesto pledge because of pressure from within her own party, not just because she's been outvoted by opposition MPs. And then there's the Eye of Sauron, which is the ERG, the far-right group that want a hard Brexit at all costs. Will her indecision be broken by increasing threats from those nearer to the centre of the party? Or is she just going to remain paralysed with fear? I suspect that we will never see May take a stand on this. I think she's just going to stay like a rabbit in headlights, not knowing which way to go, and just staying there and getting squished. But time will tell on that one. So there we go. In terms of her plan B, it's basically her plan A, only she might turn the deal into something that may get through Parliament, but will then be rejected by the EU. I suppose it shifts the blame somewhere else, but nonetheless, the end result is still the same. Unless something remarkable happens, we're leaving with no deal. That's what the EU are preparing for. That's what I had a weird comment today, actually. Someone saying, oh, isn't it weird? The IMF, who were saying that Brexit would be a disaster, are now saying that our economy will flourish. No, they're not. In fact, they have just said that one of the two major threats to the global economy right now, one is the slump in China, two is Brexit. One of the more so than Trump. We are more dangerous to the global economy than Donald Trump. That is an accolade no one wants. But there we are. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, please. Subscribe for further content. Click the bell notification, because then you'll be notified not only of further content, but also the polls I put up, so you can choose which topics I discuss on certain days of the week. And the poll for tomorrow is still up. There is one that's in a bit of a lead, but you never know. And thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.